Good morning, and thank you everyone for your patience, and we welcome you all to the day 2 of Indo-Pacific Economic Conclave, the 3rd edition, presented by BCCNI in association with Ministry of External Affairs Branch Secretary at Kolkata. Couple of requests. While the proceedings are on, if you could kindly put your mobiles on the silent mode, it will help the speakers focus on their speeches. And without further ado, I would request all the dignitaries for the inaugural session of day 2 to kindly come up on the dais as I announce their names. Request Mr. Arnab Basu, President BCCI, and Clients and Industries Leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers Private Limited. Sri A. Ajay Kumar, Joint Secretary, States, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Professor Dr. Ajitabo Roy Chaudhary, Professor Emeritus and Head, Department of Economics, Adams University, and Chairperson of our Economic Affairs National Committee. Dr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, our Chief Guest for the day, Chief Economic Advisor of India. And Mr. Obijit Roy, President Designate of BCCNI and Managing Director and CEO of Berger Paints India Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a good round of applause for our inaugural panel? Thank you. I would request our President, Mr. Arnab Basu, to kindly deliver his welcome address.
Thank you, Shambhit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed delegates. It's indeed a pleasure to see you all here, and I'm just reflecting on what we heard yesterday. I think yesterday was a power-packed session where it was also a testament to the vibrant synergy that we saw between the different countries within the Indo-Pacific, between the industry, academia, policymakers, and of course, it was about India's steadfast commitment to fostering maritime cooperation across the Indo-Pacific. The active participation that we had from all of you made the day truly special for us. And if you think of what we heard yesterday, it was a lot about trade. It was a lot about maritime trade in the Indo-Pacific. It's also about the impact of what's happening in the geopolitics, which is affecting that. While managing the big power relationships, India's focus on solidifying its Indo-Pacific credentials are by managing the areas of stabilizing the neighborhood, contributing to the region's economic integration, and actively developing a technology edge to deliver goods in the region. Today, we probably take a bit of a shift to another topic, which is around sustainability. Sustainability is also very significant for India's growth and India's resilience in the days to come. And India's initiatives of building its technological edge by strengthening cybersecurity and defense collaborations, investing in AI-driven defense capabilities, upscaling local templates via the Digital India Initiative, they're all based on a fundamental premise that we will build it all sustainably. Together, these strategies will enable India to position itself as a key player in shaping the Indo-Pacific's future. As we gather for day 2, we also would carry the momentum of some of the discussions from yesterday into the overarching theme of the year's conclave of towards new horizons of maritime partnership. But when we look at the sub-theme for today of innovation and sustainability in the Indo-Pacific, this is a topic which deeply resonates in today's context of what we have as climate challenges, what we read in the papers every day, and what we all should be quite worried about. We would like to, of course, reiterate the support and partnership which we have received from the Ministry of External Affairs, Branch Secretariat of Kolkata. And when we think of sustainability and innovation, these are intrinsically connected with some of the global challenges, disruptions, dynamics, and opportunities which are generating from today's world. And the key mantra today is partnerships and collaborations as suggested in the SDG 17 of the United Nations. The Indo-Pacific region faces some of the most diverse and complex climate-related security risks. Frameworks like the IPEC and the Quad are, of course, advancing sustainable trade, clean energy. But the Quad's resilience as an effective grouping in the Indo-Pacific has stood the test of time, beginning as a collaboration to coordinate humanitarian assistance and disaster relief following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. The IPEF is not a free trade agreement, but it allows the members to negotiate along the four main pillars of supply chain resilience, clean energy, decarbonization and infrastructure, taxation and anti-corruption, and fair and resilient trade. When we think of the rapid economic growth in the region, urbanization, our landscape issues, proximity to the sea, population density, and other many factors which are imposing environmental and social challenges, Asia and the Indo-Pacific SDG Progress Report 2025 showcases innovative community-level partnerships and explores how local efforts can help bridge the evidences which also can bridge the gaps between inclusive progress and what the SDGs are asking us to focus on. The partnerships between governments, development partners, business collaborators, and local communities are needed to address the priorities towards these SDGs. It's been widely reported that technology adaptations and technology innovations will accelerate the contribution to the SDGs and help us adopt sustainable practices. So these are actually not very separate verticals, but they are interrelated grids connecting with the priority areas stated in the SDGs, from climate actions to equality to health, education, and many others. Today's session will feature an exceptional lineup of speakers which you all are aware of, including renowned economists, thought leaders from the Indo-Pacific, and distinguished Indian voices. Their participation reaffirms the global participation at the conclave and our collective efforts to explore disruptive ideas that drive sustainable economic growth, driven by cutting-edge technologies and prudent financial models, redefining the Indo-Pacific ecosystem and strengthening multilateral cooperation. Sustainability is a holistic goal, and it needs wider participation from a fairly wide range of stakeholders. Private sector plays an important role in the contribution towards sustainability, and when we look at the business models, the private sector has a big role to play. It's also a fairly big role to play when we think of some of the policy frameworks which are being made with them in mind. The collaborative efforts lead to tangible outcomes, driving green and inclusive growth. As I said yesterday also, the conclave is essentially here to create a platform to exchange ideas, facilitate collaborations, brainstorm, showcase our best practices, and learn. On behalf of the Bengal Chamber, I extend my deepest gratitude to all our distinguished guests, partners, sponsors, and participants for lending their wisdom, expertise, and more importantly, their time at this conclave. Thank you. Let us all begin. Thank you.
Good morning, President, Chief Guest, Dr. V. Anant Nageswaran, Sri A. Ajay Kumar, Professor Dr. Ajitaba Rai Chaudhary, esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to Day 2 of the conference. Day 2 will focus on the theme Innovation and Sustainability in the Indo-Pacific Ecosystem. We are gathered here to explore how innovation and sustainable practices can drive growth, resilience, and collaboration across the Indo-Pacific region, a vital ecosystem that encompasses diverse economies, cultures, and environmental challenges. The Indo-Pacific is not just a geographical expanse, it is a dynamic arena where the nations are pivotal in fostering economic partnerships, technological advancements, and eco-friendly solutions. From renewable energy initiatives to cutting-edge supply chain innovations, the themes of today promise to illuminate pathways towards a greener, more prosperous future. To set the stage for these insightful deliberations, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Sri A. Ajay Kumar, Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Sri Ajay Kumar, a senior Indian Foreign Service officer, is Joint Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, overseeing coordination with states and union territories. He has served as India's ambassador to Iraq, High Commissioner to Uganda, and held key postings in Bahrain, Tehran, and Australia with notable contributions in crisis management and development cooperation. Please join me in welcoming Sri A. Ajay Kumar.
Chief guest of today's event, Dr. V. Ananthanageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India, Mr. Arnab Basu, President, BCC and I, Professor Dr. Ajita Ray Chowdhury, and Mr. Abhijit Roy, President-designate BCC and I, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, we had met in the same place, and that time the role given to me was setting the context for this event and what is Indo-Pacific and what's the relevance of this conclave. So, we have all heard what's the relevance of Indo-Pacific and why this conclave we are doing. Today, we are actually focusing on innovation and sustainability. I've been asked to make a keynote address on that, and I'm not sure how much justice I can do to that topic because it's very it's for experts to deal with that. I rather limit my address to very specific area where what India as a nation is doing and how we can take a lead in this innovation and sustainability. Friends, Indo-Pacific is not just a map on the strategist's desk. It's the beating heart of our shared culture. It's home to 3/5 of humanity. It carries half of the global trade across waters. Its forests, rivers, and reefs are among the richest sources of life on earth. And yet, it is also the theater of some of the gravest challenges of the time. Rising seas threaten to erase nations from existence. Coral reefs are dying in front of our eyes. Cyclones grow more violent, floods more destructive, droughts more relentless. Plastics chokes our waters, pollution poisons our air, and unchecked exploitation pushes biodiversity to the edge. So this is the scenario in which we are living. And this is where I feel India's role become not just important, but also indispensable. India is not a bystander in the Indo-Pacific. India is at its center, geographically, historically, and morally. For thousands of years, our coasts have been gateways of exchange, where merchants, scholars, and pilgrims sailed across the sea to share ideas, goods, and culture. Today, India is once again in the center, not as a power-seeking dominance, but as a partner, as a convener, a source of innovation and sustainability for the entire region. Why India? What role we are going to play? It is because we carry a unique combination of strengths and advantages. We are a nation of youth. More than half of our population is under the age of 30. This means hundreds of millions of minds eager to experiment, to disrupt, to build, and innovate. We are a nation of science and technology. Our rockets have reached Mars. Our digital platforms connect billions of people. Our pharmaceutical industries heal the world. We are a nation that can think big and then scale big, whether it is in electrifying hundreds of millions of homes or bringing sanitation to entire population. And we are a nation whose philosophy has always been one of balance between progress and preservation, between human ambition and harmony with the nature. This concept, this idea is there in our blood. So that is why I feel India is there to lead in this question of innovation and sustainability. So what we can do? I think first we must power the region with clean energy. We are already leading by example. For too long, the growth and development have been changed to fossil fuel. The result we are seeing now. Now India is breaking this chain. We are building some of the largest solar parks in the world. We are investing in wind, in tidal energy, and in green hydrogen. And we are not doing this alone. Through initiatives like International Solar Alliance, we are helping and partnering with the nations across the Indo-Pacific to light up their homes with clean energy. Imagine the power of an Indo-Pacific where every island nation, every coastal village, every fishing harbor is sustained by renewable energy and affordable and clean. That future is within our reach, and that is where India can contribute. Second, we must turn the blue economy into green. The oceans of Indo-Pacific feed our people, connect our markets, and regulate our climate. Yet, they are under siege. Overfishing strips them bare. Plastics strangle marine life. Rising temperature bleach coral reefs into ghosts. Here too, India can play a role. Our scientists are developing sustainable aquaculture. Our innovators are creating alternatives to single-use plastics. Our coastal states are restoring mangroves that shield against storms. Let's take these models, refine them, and share with our partners. Let us work with our neighbors, Maldives, Mauritius, Indonesia, Fiji, and beyond, to make Indo-Pacific a sanctuary of marine life. Third, we must build resilience against disasters. When ocean rises, it cuts across borders, and it doesn't see national borders or race or religion. It just affects human life across. Here we have once again built a very resilient model to face disasters. Our satellites map storms paths. Our networks spread early warnings. Our relief forces move with speed. Already India has shared these capabilities with our neighbors. We are a leader in this disaster management. We have been always the first respondent in whenever a disaster strikes in this region, whether it is man-made or natural. But we must go further. We must create Indo-Pacific a grid of resilience where knowledge, data, and support flow freely. In this, we are ready to be not just a first responder, but the first partner. Fourth, we must secure our food and water. The Indo-Pacific is home to millions of farmers and fishermen. Climate change is disturbing this balance, their livelihood. Droughts parch fields, saline water creeps into the fertile land. Traditional crops fail, but here again, innovation offers hope. In India, farmers are now using precision irrigation to save water. cultivating drought-resistant varieties, and experimenting with the climate-smart methods. These are not luxuries, they are necessities now. And India can ensure that the lessons we learned in our fields are shared with the farmers in Southeast Asia, with islands of the Pacific, and with every community fighting to grow food in uncertain conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, but the technology alone is not enough. Sustainability is not a gadget we can buy, nor an app we can download. It is a way of thinking, a way of governing, and a way of living. That's why India's role must go beyond laboratories and factories. We must lead in building coalitions, in shaping policies, in mobilizing finance. We must bring countries together under common framework through Indian Ocean Rim Association, through BIMSTEC, through Quad and beyond. We must share training, open our universities, expand our fellowships, and ensure that capacity building is the heart of cooperation. There are already stories that giving hope. In Maldives, solar panels built with Indian support power homes and reduce dependency on fossil fuel. In Odisha, mangroves restored by communities are shielding villages from devastating cyclones. In Gujarat, farmers are using mobile apps to guide irrigation, conserving water while increasing yields. In the Bay of Bengal, our satellites provide life-saving warning of approaching storms. Each of these is a small story, but together they point to a larger truth. Innovation and sustainability are not abstract concepts. They are real, they are practical, and they can transform lives. Yet we must not be naive. The road ahead is steep. Financing green technologies require courage and vision. Bureaucratic bottlenecks must be cut away. Infrastructure gap must be filled. Technology must flow freely without being trapped by narrow interests. So, how we can move forward? The answer lies in the commitment, clarity, and collaboration. India must set bold targets for its and stand by them. We must invest not just in technology but in people, in the scientists who invent, in the entrepreneurs who scale, and in the communities who sustain. We must build partnerships where knowledge flows two ways, where small island states are not passive recipients but equal contributors of wisdom. We must ensure that every innovation, every policy, every investment is judged not just by profit today, but sustainability tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, the Indo-Pacific is more than a region. It is a promise that ocean that connects us will not divide us, a promise that wealth of our lands and water will not be squandered, but preserved, a promise that future will not belong to conflict and collapse, but cooperation and creation. With this, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sri Kumar, for that enlightening and thought-provoking address. You did mention about the Indo-Pacific, as a very, very important part of the world economy. 50% of humanity is here, almost 60% of the economy is in this region. India is a major player in this particular Indo-Pacific region. We have a young population who is scientifically inclined and therefore promotes innovation and sustainability. There are 4 points which you mentioned, which I briefly would like to just reiterate. One is clean energy. We are doing a good job there as far as India is concerned on solar power and looking at other areas like nuclear power as well. Blue economy to green, alternate to single-use plastics is something which you mentioned which stood out. Resilience against disaster. we have this satellite and technology which allows us to predict more accurately impending disasters. Food and water, which is a problem area. We have at times a lot of these weather related issues. So precision irrigation, using technology to grow the right kind of crops at the right time. These are things which are happening with the help of technology, which is, basically innovating and helping the environment to sustain. All of this is happening in India, and India is also helping the Indo-Pacific, in that way. So this is what you said in brief. Let me now welcome, and it's a great privilege that I invite a chief guest, Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran, Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, the 18th Chief Economic Advisor. He is an economist, author, and teacher with expertise in global finance and the Indian economy. A PhD from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and an IIM Ahmedabad alumnus. He has held senior research roles in the international financial institutions across Switzerland and Singapore. Mr. Nageswaran. Can we have a warm welcome round, please?
President Mr. Arnab Basu, my colleague in the Government of India, Sri Ajay Kumar, Joint Secretary, Professor Dr. Ajitava Rai Chaudhary, and the session moderator, Mr. Abhijit Roy, office bearers, distinguished former presidents, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a small apology for contributing to a 10-minute delay in the start of the proceedings, as I did not account for the fact that the morning shift of schools were ending as I was making my way into this venue. So my apologies for that. I'm very happy about this Indo-Pacific Economic Conclave because the President gave a very good overview of what transpired yesterday and what is going to transpire today as well in the deliberations. I think when we are all grappling and coping with the rapid turn of events, some predictable, some not, etc., it's very important for at least some organization to step back and look at the bigger picture and provide thought leadership to give a sense of coherence to how the Indo-Pacific can evolve. And I think in that sense, these kinds of conclaves, which look at the broader issues that will transcend personalities and will last for, and whose impact will last for decades. I think to have that kind of deliberation is a very important one, necessary, and I therefore commend the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and the sponsors, the Ministry of External Affairs, for organizing an event of this nature with the kind of topics that are being deliberated in the yesterday and today. So today's theme of sustainability in the Indo-Pacific, given that many of them are littoral countries, states, etc., is a very timely one. For India, which is making a very strong comeback from the post-COVID or the COVID times economic contraction, many of us are aware of the last 4 years of economic growth rates that the country has achieved, which has been a standout performance among the G20 countries. At the same time, pursuing public infrastructure improvements, maintaining fiscal prudence and stability, and trying to build our manufacturing capabilities and indispensability in a world which is now very much concentrated on a single country for multiple sources of inputs, raw materials, capital goods, etc. We have been trying to pursue all these goals even while maintaining economic growth, because without that there are no resources to pursue these goals. And at the same time, energy transition is a generational challenge. While we acknowledge the fact that today's developed countries got to where they are through abundant and cheap energy, India is required to pursue energy transition, which has not been hitherto pursued on this scale by the world economy simultaneously. So we are stepping into a world of unknown unknowns, and some of that was brought home to us. The home truth stared in front of us when we noticed what happened on the 28th of April in Spain and in the adjoining parts of Portugal and some parts of France as well. In other words, it brought home to us the recognition that public policy, whether it is sustainability, climate resilience, energy transition, etc., and economic development, all of them involve very crucial and critical trade-offs. And conclaves of this nature will advance the cause of sustainability and resilience by recognizing the trade-offs. And I want to dedicate my address to these trade-offs. While the marginal cost of solar and wind energy is zero, the upfront costs are significant or non-trivial. Apart from the well-known problem of intermittency, which requires us to keep innovating and investing in battery storage and technology, which is improving, by the way. Today, we are able to talk of 2 hours to 4 hours and almost 6 hours of battery storage. Nonetheless, whether we can sustain these levels of storage at a grid scale is still an open question. So apart from the problem of intermittency, what the blackout in Spain reminded us was of this principle of inertia, which even non-engineers like us had to understand and figure out that the absence of inertia in renewable energy feed is something that requires additional investment or backup sources of power, which could be based on fossil fuel. So if we have to invest $1 for dollar in grid technologies or grid upgradation and also have backup power, then naturally it is not just the marginal cost of generation of 1 unit of power from solar and wind. It is not the only consideration to be reckoned with. A country that is of a lower middle income category, aspiring to become a developed economy by 2047, must reckon with a lot of marginal costs, which are not necessarily marginal but substantial in terms of the outlays involved. That is one aspect of the trade-off that we have to keep in mind, because naturally resources have competing uses. The second trade-off that we need to keep in mind is that it is not a truism, or it's very well known that economic development goes hand in hand with energy consumption. So our energy consumption will necessarily keep rising as our per capita incomes rise in the coming years. But if you look at the kind of carbon budget that developing countries get, an arbitrarily chosen carbon budget, because it doesn't account for the overdrawn carbon budget by today's developed countries over the last 200 years, and therefore the budget that is allocated to developing countries for the coming 25 or 50 years is an arbitrary one, and the carbon budget is supposedly limited, which is why the emphasis is on ensuring that we keep the global warming to not more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But then, even if we are able to achieve the carbon budget that we are allowed for under this global constraint of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we will still remain very much energy undersupplied compared to what developed countries were able to enjoy during their phase of development. In other words, even if we continue to invest in renewable energy, which, by the way, I'm very glad that my colleague pointed out, Mr. Ajay Kumar, that with respect to nationally determined contributions, India is far ahead in terms of emission mitigation, far ahead of any other country in G20. And also in terms of installed capacity of renewable energy, we are far ahead than our own targets. So it is not that India is speaking from a position of defensiveness. India is speaking from a position of development imperative. So if the carbon budget limits the amount of per capita energy consumption in the coming years, by definition, given that energy consumption and economic development go together, it also limits development. In other words, we have to make sure that energy transition and dealing with climate change do not consign not just India, but also other developing countries in Indo-Pacific and beyond, and Africa, do not consign them to a state of permanent underdevelopment. That's an important trade-off for us to keep in mind. In other words, I will try to outline some possible practical answers, but it is a binding constraint which we have to try to overcome by only reminding the developed countries of their obligations not just to contribute financial resources, but also technology and innovation. Overturning their own barriers of intellectual property protection, etc., without sharing of technology and resources, this common problem cannot be addressed. We know that financial resources are becoming a little bit of a challenge even in developed countries, given that many countries are struggling to balance their budgets and books, etc. And therefore, their contribution, either in bilateral terms or in multilateral terms, is going to be in short supply. So then the one important area, or two important areas where they can still contribute to energy transition and dealing with climate change will be in the areas of technology sharing, not necessarily subjecting themselves to private ownership, but putting them as public commons for the world to benefit from. And second, dealing with the challenge of resources, critical minerals and rare earths in a collective manner. These are the contributions that the developed countries have to make if today's developing countries have to enjoy their fundamental right to development. Otherwise, we will be consigned, as I said earlier, to a permanent state of underdevelopment. And that is an important trade-off for us to recognize. The current path of carbon emission mitigation does not allow for India, or for that matter, many developing countries, to achieve their economic development goals. So there is a trade-off there. And it is appropriate, therefore, that India put Viksit Bharat goals at 2047, 23 years ahead of the net zero goal of 2070. It's equally important to remember that Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, were formulated and signed on to by the world in September 2015, 3 months before the Paris Agreement was signed in December. So it is appropriate that both temporally and logically, SDG goals take precedence over climate goals, and climate is one part of the SDG goals. The third trade-off that we have to keep in mind, one was initially I spoke about the investment trade-off, the second one is the resources trade-off, and the third trade-off is that as a country which has always, even before this concept of carbon tax came into existence, as a country that has always placed a high deal of taxes, even though we don't call them carbon taxes, on petrol, diesel consumption and coal cess, etc. The governments in India, both union and state, collect a lot of revenues from sale of petrol and diesel to the tune of 7.5 lakh crores, 7.5 trillion rupees. And the quicker we try to phase out fossil fuels, there will be an erosion of resources, tax resources available to our governments. And without those resources, we will not be able to invest in the green transition, which requires subsidies and government hand-holding as well. So there again, there is a trade-off. The next trade-off, apart from the fiscal implications, is with respect to banking system. India, after going through 1 decade of banking crisis, in the second decade of the millennium, is now having an extremely stable banking system, adequately capitalized, willing to lend, and supporting infrastructure development and capital formation in the private sector, and also for household consumption. But if we are forced to retire thermal power plants, not only do they become stranded assets, they will also have implication on the soundness of the banking system. There will be a chain reaction in terms of, once again, banks becoming undercapitalized if assets have to be returned down or returned off because you cannot run them anymore. So therefore, what it means is that countries have very real and genuine trade-offs between development and energy transition. It is one thing to say that they are not mutually exclusive. It would be nice if they were not mutually exclusive. But history tells us that there are times when they will be, and they are mutually exclusive, and we need to therefore make choices, both in terms of sequence and in terms of priorities. The other important consideration is, of course, the global dependence or dependence on a single country or a few countries for rare earths and critical minerals, which induce a lot of vulnerability. Because today the reality is, although we have come a long way from where we were in being excessively import dependent, we have come a long way. There is domestic capacity being created in EV battery production, in solar panels, wafers, modules, etc. We are creating capacity at a very fast pace, so we have to acknowledge that we are not where we were 5 years ago. But nonetheless, as things stand even today, for every single solar panel we install and every single EV we sell, our import dependence is going up on one country. So there is a concentration of mining capacity or processing capacity in one country, whether it is graphite, lithium, cobalt, copper, etc. Dependence on one country will also undermine not only national security dimensions, but also the pace of renewable energy transition. And paradoxically, those of you who may have already read The Material World, a book by Ed Conway, chief economist of Sky Broadcasting, published in 2020 or thereabouts. The paradox is that to bring out from below the earth the various rare earths and critical minerals and to process them, to be able to facilitate energy transition and renewable energy, you require a tremendous amount of energy in the first place. So, given these considerations, countries have to choose certain things. I already mentioned, globally, in a multilateral setting, countries have no choice but to collaborate, to be more open about intellectual property distribution and sharing. But individually, in countries like ours or in other developing countries, there are some other policies that we need to follow. One is to think of non-fossil fuels, not just with respect to solar and wind, but also with respect to hydro, nuclear, etc. Which is why the Indian government, in the budget in February 2025, announced that we would open up nuclear energy for private sector participation and would amend the Civil Nuclear Liabilities Act to enable foreign collaboration as well. Nuclear energy has to play a much more important part, and therefore the research and development, science and technology institutions have to not only absorb but assimilate the technology with respect to small modular reactors. The sooner we do it, the better. So nuclear energy has to be an important part. The second aspect where conclaves such as this and in future have to focus on is adaptation. Given the current policy orientation of the US administration towards energy transition or global warming, etc., the Department of Energy in the US brought out a report last month in August, which is very interesting and important and an honest report. It kind of acknowledges the trade-off that yes, there is warming, it doesn't deny warming, but it says that's a price to pay for growth and development. And they are saying that obviously in the context of the fact they know that a lot of energy is required to power the AI data centers. So they acknowledge the trade-off. And therefore, given this position that they have taken, and with other countries also, when push comes to a shove, even European countries which are much more on the face of it, committed to energy transition and green energy, when push comes to a shove, in the face of resistance from the public, which doesn't want to face higher energy cost, and most European countries, let's face it, post-COVID, have seen an extremely high increase in energy costs, which is what also has contributed to the decline in the manufacturing share of global manufacturing shares in Germany or in the UK or in France, etc. And that is why even FT in the last couple of days has talked about France being an important country to carry along with the European Union's climate agenda. So there are internal dynamics within European Union itself because the trade-offs are beginning to come home to roost, even there. And so given the fact that the United States under the current administration has taken a different view of global warming and climate change and energy transition, and given that European countries not only are constrained in terms of budgets, but also in terms of public acceptance, given the high energy cost, the reality is that 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels will be more and more distant and will recede in terms of its ability, in terms of the world's ability to achieve that goal. And therefore, what it means in practical terms is that climate adaptation becomes an important issue, important priority. Emission mitigation is one, but emission mitigation does directly constrain our carbon budget and therefore economic development. The via media or the sequencing therefore has to be investment in climate adaptation, whether it is in investment in floodplains, restricting construction in coastal zones, creating sea walls, and even at the household level, adapting to warmer climates through traditional and non-traditional and scientific methods, improving energy efficiency, and reducing energy intensity per unit of economic activity. These are more practical goals that we need to pursue. So in the name of pursuit of clean energy and green energy, we should not lose sight of climate adaptation, which in the years to come, we will realize is the more practical, realistic, and viable goal in comparison to emission mitigation. The other dimension, given that India in the last 10 years has taken its total length of public transportation metro network from barely nothing or 200 kilometers to more than 1,000 kilometers today across 18 to 20 cities, we need to make sure that public transportation becomes widely used and patronized by the residents of these cities and beyond. But right now, they are not easily usable when there is monsoon or when in the evenings due to safety concerns, etc. The last mile connectivity that links bus network to public transportation metro network is absent in most cases. And there are cities, not just in developed world, but also in developing world like Sao Paulo, etc., which have made it that much more easier from the point of view of common ticketing to mobility of the tickets you use in different modes of public transportation, and in terms of providing connectivity through feeder buses, etc., closer to your neighborhoods and residential areas. There is much more that we can do to make public transportation not only economically viable, but also practically useful to the residents of these cities. Because given our size, the kind of per capita vehicle ownership that the West has gotten used to is something that we cannot afford. Not only in terms of traffic gridlock outside these doors, but also in terms of energy consumption and in terms of cleaner air and water. Because sustainable development is not just about warming, it's also about cleaner air and water. And the amount of productivity we lose apart from the mental stress that gets built up when we get stuck in traffic, etc., and our urban cities will simply be reduced to a crawl, or we will be stuck, which is almost already a reality in many places. So it's very, not only important, but urgent that we make our public transport networks more widely usable. And we also as citizens, in terms of development and personal material advancement, we cannot compare ourselves to the kind of Western standards of living in terms of vehicle ownership, etc., or for that matter, the dependence on very high electricity intensive modes of living. We cannot afford to follow and emulate those practices. It is simply not necessary. That is why the Economic Survey in July 2024 spoke about using both non-traditional and traditional practices in this country to propagate this concept of circular economy, where water used by households feeds into fields, etc., and the concept of temple tanks, water bodies, rainwater harvesting, all these things constitute more traditional ways of harnessing nature and living in harmony with nature, and these are examples of adaptation. So we need to revive those practices. We need to make them widespread, and where policy is required to facilitate them, yes, policy must and will do so and is doing so. But it also requires citizen participation and an awareness that dealing with climate change is not about the topic of only these symposiums or conclaves or something that only governments will do and we simply are passive takers. But it requires active participation, active awareness and consciousness of the fact that given the near impossibility of the development aspirations and climate imperatives, these micro and day-to-day adaptation and traditional practices, investment in public goods, understanding the limitations of private goods, etc., will be the route to sustainable living. If we embrace these, then it is possible for India to have a very fair shot at achieving our development aspirations for 2047 and also being realistic about achieving our net zero goals by 2070. With these words, I once again thank the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. And once again, at the risk of repetition, I commend them for choosing this topic and engaging in deliberations such as this. Thought leadership matters more than ever. And I thank you for doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nageswaran, for that very interesting speech. And talking about the various trade-offs that exist as far as the Indian situation is concerned. You did mention that if you look at the few trade-offs which we can see in front of us, for example, if you want to do away with thermal power, then the banks get affected because they have invested a lot of money. They need to write off the assets that they have. Similarly, if you look at the other trade-off in terms of, having clean energy, now a lot of taxes that the state governments earn today are from taxing on petrol and diesel and other fuels. Now what happens to that income? Who subsidizes that part? So there are a large part of these issues which crop up, and there are these trade-offs which we have to deal with. What you have indicated is that possibly we can look at a few things which are interesting. One is nuclear energy. Rather than concentrating on solar power, which is very good, but then we are dependent on one single country for almost everything. Maybe even storage batteries, then again we are dependent on that one country. So can we look at nuclear power instead? That's one idea which you threw to the audience at large. Second is in terms of actually saying that the metro railways can be, which we are expanding furiously across the country, they can be a great help because it can reduce the public transportation consumption of fuel and thereby reduce the consumption that we have of fuel in the country. So these are issues which you have, enlightened us on. Very, very interesting in terms of trade-off and a difficult choice in front of us. You did indicate that climate adaptability might be better than actually trying to do what we are currently engaged in terms of emission reduction. So that's something which is a very interesting thought which you leave behind for us. I open for a few questions from the audience. If you don't mind, there might be 3 or 4 questions from the audience, and if you can take those questions. Sure. So we'll keep it short. Just 3 questions, please. And he has to leave for another event. So yes, Dr. Mishra.
Thank you very much. And obviously, all the things that you say require a considerable amount of rethinking about the way we produce, consume energy, as well as our daily lifestyles. There are a couple of things I think you left out. One was an evaluation of the possibility of completely new technologies on the horizon, given that the pace of that innovation is increasing dramatically. And so an alternative scenario where even in the case of nuclear energy, the costs decline very sharply. So I think that is something that does require. One other question which, we kept on talking about reliance on another country, which of course in this case is China. The relationship between China and India also is something that might alter in the context of a multipolar world that we are. So there are several alternative scenarios, the one on technology, the other in terms of geopolitics, which affect the kind of trade-offs that you're talking about. And I just want you to respond.
Anyone else with? Yes, please.
Hello.
Yeah, okay.
Raising the issue of adaptation, and I quite a lot in sync with what you said about adaptation and the importance thereof. But I was just wondering whether government has any thoughts on basically bringing about a transition accelerator, energy transition accelerator, generate carbon markets. For instance, we don't seem to have functioning carbon markets. And what exactly is holding us from that? Is it low emission norms? Because now we have raised our emission norms also. What about the reporting part of it or anything like that? Thank you.
Can I? Should I? Okay.
Should I start?
Vivek sir, you can go ahead and probably we'll stop at that because he has a time constraint.
Yeah. So, sir, thank you for that enlightening speech. You spoke about circular economy, and rightly so, because it is estimated that 40% of the carbon footprint would come from the waste created. And now with this emphasis on renewable energy, there'll be a renewable energy waste also. So, do you think that considering this circular economy, waste to worth technologies should be the focus, and a comprehensive policy, for example, metal waste policy? So much of waste will be generated, is that required?
So thank you, sir, for pointing out that technological developments can release the binding constraints along with changes in geopolitical configurations. Those points are well taken. Whether it is, I did mention, for example, that battery storage has improved from a few minutes to few hours now. I did acknowledge the possibility, but as you correctly point out, both technological improvements, innovations, and geopolitical configurations can become less binding. Point well taken. Mridul, thank you for pointing out. I think there is a green taxonomy or a climate taxonomy under works right now, and then carbon trading is sort of coming into some sort of a market structure is evolving. And third, disclosures. And disclosures have to be not only in terms of emission norms, but also in terms of how climate change will affect the soundness of balance sheets of the financial institutions. RBI is in the process of, because I think if you focus only on emission-related disclosures, whether it is in scope 1 or scope 2 or scope 3, the true risk of climate change will not be captured only by focusing on emissions. I think, as I said, it's important to capture the entire gamut of risks that climate change imposes on our balance sheet. So, but I think in all these three areas, I think work is very much underway. And I think your point is well taken, sir, about waste to work, metal waste, recycling. And I'm glad to report to you that the CSIR laboratories are very much focused on recycling. I think with respect to critical minerals and rare earths, much of it will have to come from recycling, apart from new excavations. So there is considerable work going on, and some of these lab technologies will be the ones that the new government-funded Anusandhan National Research Foundation and the Research and Development Innovation Fund, RDIF, will now have to take it to the next level, from CSIR labs to TRL levels 1 to 5, or TRL levels 6 to 9, etc. That is the pathway for these waste to work or recycling and circular economy technologies or concepts to become reality. But point is well taken.
Now I request Professor Ajitava Roy Chaudhary to give the concluding remarks for the inaugural session.
Well, I promise to be very brief. I will not take much time because Mr. Nageshwaran is in a hurry. Mr. Basu really set the tone that, with the disaster relief, supply chain, SDG, these are all emerging goals in the Quad as well as in the Indo-Pacific region. And the tone was carried on by Mr. Ajay Kumar. He talked about
this asset, real asset is our younger population. I would hasten to add that there is need to be awareness campaign among the younger population as well, because I feel that's one of the, because I am in teaching profession, deal with the younger population, and that's one of the things I think is very much needed, the awareness and the awareness campaign. In fact, he talked about the mangroves, recycling, and the mode of thinking. I think that's very important, that the lifestyle changes. We can talk a lot about this thing should be done or that thing should be done, but finally, the lifestyle which we have need to be looked into too. Well, let me come to the Nageshwaran. I always enjoy his speech. In fact, last time also you had a very wonderful presentation online. And basically, he talked about two things. One is trade-offs, the other is possible solutions. And if we go for the trade-offs, very important is that once you install the alternative sources of energy, solar or others, the marginal cost, the additional cost of running it is not much. But the initial setup cost, or we call it in economics terms, sunk cost for that is quite a bit. And it's a difficult thing to finance that particular thing. The second is always this trade-off, economic development and energy consumption. If we want to develop, we need more energy. And for that matter, how to really tackle these questions? As Dr. Nageswaran said, the developed countries who talk a lot about this energy transition set goals, and in fact there is always this burden on us that you should do something in order to develop, you must also cut this. Intellectual property regime that should think of public commons. Certain technology which is globally beneficial, not to the countries alone, but the humanity in general, must be very seriously thought about. Fiscal constraint, another trade-off. We need money for investment. Taxation on non-renewable energy can finance the renewable energy transition. But then there is always a commotion if we have a lot of taxation on non-renewable energy. We may not like it because we still now depend a lot on non-renewable energy. Banking system, burden, if we want to transition from the renewable, non-renewable to renewable, what will happen to those facilities which are basically non-renewable? A huge amount of that bank has invested. What will happen if we want to close them? Then the global issue, the global dependence on critical minerals and others. So it may not be an individual effort, but one should take it as a global issue, global problem. Then I think the most important part which I enjoyed is the solution part. Not everything will be done in one shot, but like the collaborative effort must have a mix, hydro, nuclear, solar. Each of them has a marginal cost issue. And I would say one should calculate the marginal cost and marginal benefit too. Just looking at the cost will not do. There should be a long-term, as the investment projects always go, the cost-benefit analysis should be there. And maybe in the long run, that cost-benefit will show that even with a sunk cost, high sunk cost, maybe the thing will turn out to be really, really socially profitable. Social cost-benefit, as we say. Adaptation of clear energy is very important, and in fact global manufacturing share is going down because of this imposition of targets. And the point is, whenever the manufacturing sector, wherever the manufacturing sector is going down, we have a stress on manufacturing. Manufacturing is something which we have stressed so much in Make in India and otherwise. Service sector is also go hand in hand with the manufacturing. So how much energy intensity of service there? Obviously may be less, but the service sector takes over the manufacturing in a large way, must calculate the energy intensity of services. Some of the services may be like transportation and other services, maybe construction services. One has to see. Public transportation, last mile connectivity. But one thing, Dr. Nageshwaran, I feel, One more minute. One more minute, I promise. I'll stop. Private versus public, he talked about the last mile connectivity, public transportation, but a lot of transport here is private. And a lot of transport in some of the developed countries are totally public. So public transportation, government owned. So that might be a problem. Circular economy, rainwater harvesting, that's one of the big solutions which we should think about. But anyway, it's a wonderful thing. All of us enjoyed the deliberations, and I'm quite sure we'll go back with lots of thought in our head, what lies ahead and how to tackle this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have a pleasant task to perform. May I request our President, Mr. Arnab Basu, to kindly hand over a token of our appreciation to Mr. A. Ajay Kumar. Mr. Ajay Kumar was here yesterday, so this is another occasion for us. Thank you. May I now request our President, Mr. Arnab Basu, and our incoming President, Mr. Abhijit Ray, to kindly hand over a token of our appreciation to Dr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, our Chief Guest. We have some goodies also. Can we have a photo up, please?